Allahu Akbar.
Yeah, I miss you so much. This can't be goodbye forever.
I opened the will of Alhaja Ronke Adeyemi. The entire estate, 50 million, properties, investments, business holdings to Temitope.
What? To her alone?
The brothers inherit nothing.
This is a lie. No, it can't be.
The will is clear.
This is an outrage.
Please, let's stay calm.
Calm? He stole everything. We won't stand for this. You'll pay for this.
Temitope Adeyemi received devastating news in March 2024. Her grandmother, Alhaja Ronke Adeyemi, had died peacefully in her sleep at age 78 in their family compound in Ibadan. Temitope, who'd been raised by her grandmother after her parents died in a car accident when she was 6, was heartbroken. The funeral was elaborate, hundreds of mourners, a white casket, prayers, burial at the family cemetery. Temitope cried throughout, losing the woman who'd been more than a grandmother, who'd been her mother. 2 weeks after the funeral, the family gathered for the will reading. Alhaja Ronke had been wealthy, owning multiple properties and businesses in Ibadan. Everyone expected the wealth to be divided among her 4 sons, Temitope's uncles. But the lawyer read something shocking. Alhaja Ronke had left everything to Temitope, the entire 50 million estate, properties, businesses, savings, all to her 28-year-old granddaughter. The uncles got nothing. They were furious, threatened to contest. But the will was ironclad, signed and witnessed properly. Then 3 months later, in June 2024, Temitope received an anonymous text message with a photo attached. The photo showed an old woman who looked exactly like Alhaja Ronke, sitting in a chair, smiling, very much alive. The message said, "Your grandmother isn't dead. Your uncles faked her death to trigger the will reading. They thought they'd inherit. When they found out you got everything, they panicked. She's being held in a house in Abeokuta. If you want her back, bring in 20 million. Temitope investigated. What she discovered was worse than kidnapping. Her uncles had staged the entire death. There'd been no body in that casket, just weights. Alhaja Ronke was alive, hidden away while her family buried an empty coffin. The plan was to get the inheritance, then discover grandma was alive later, claim it was a miracle, and keep the money. But the will going to Temitope ruined everything. Now the uncles were stuck. They couldn't bring grandma back because Temitope had the money and would never give it up. So they were keeping her hidden, demanding ransom. Subscribe because this story exposes how far family will go for money. A Yoruba woman's grandmother died March 2024, age 78, Ibadan. Elaborate funeral. Buried. Will reading shocked everyone. Grandmother left a 50 million entire estate to granddaughter. 4 uncles got nothing. Furious, but will was legal. 3 months later, anonymous message with photo. Grandmother alive. Uncle's fake death-staged funeral, empty casket. Plan was trigger, will get inheritance, then bring grandma back, claim miracle. But granddaughter inherited not them. Now stuck holding grandmother hostage, demanding 20 million ransom. This is about Nigerian inheritance greed. Fake death schemes, family conspiracies, elder abuse. Granddaughter who rescued grandmother without paying ransom. Exposed uncles, publicly forced them leave country shame. Hit that bell. This is Temitope's story. Temitope Adeyemi lost her parents, Deli and Kemi Adeyemi, in a car accident on the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway in 1996 when she was 6 years old. Her grandmother, Alhaja Ronke Adeyemi, took her in immediately. Alhaja Ronke was the matriarch of the Adeyemi family in Ibadan. Widowed young, she'd built a successful textile business and owned multiple rental properties. She was tough, business savvy, and deeply religious. She raised Temitope in her large compound in Bodia, Ibadan. Temitope's 4 uncles, Alhaja Ronke's sons, also lived in the compound with their families. Uncle Gbenga was the oldest. Uncle Wale was second. Uncle Femi third, Uncle Tun the youngest. All were in their 40s and 50s by 2024. None of them were particularly successful. They worked in their mother's businesses, but never built anything of their own. They relied on Alhaja Ronk financially, living in her compound rent-free, receiving allowances, waiting for inheritance. Temi Tokpi was different. Alhaja Ronka raised her to be independent, paid for her education through university. Temi Tokpe graduated from the University of Ibadan in 2018 with a degree in business administration and got a good job at a bank. By 2024, she was making $350,000 monthly, renting her own apartment in Bodia, independent. Alhaja Ronka was proud. She'd tell people, Temi Tokpe is my true heir. My sons are lazy. But Temi Tokpe works hard like I did. The uncles resented this. They saw Temi Tokpe as competition for inheritance, but they assumed as sons they'd get the bulk of the estate when Alhaja Ronke died. In early 2024, Alhaja Ronke's health started declining. She was 78, suffering from high blood pressure and diabetes. Doctors said she needed to reduce stress, but managing properties and businesses was stressful. She called Temi Tokpe in February 2024. I'm updating my will. I want you to know what's in it. Temi Tokpe was uncomfortable. Grandma, you're not dying soon. We don't need to discuss this. I'm old. I need to prepare. Listen, I'm leaving everything to you. All my properties, all my businesses, the entire estate. My sons get nothing. Temi Tokpe was shocked. Grandma, they're your sons. They'll contest this. Let them try. The will is legal. I've decided. You're the only one who works hard, who's independent, who doesn't see me as a walking bank account. You deserve it. What about my uncle's families? Their children. They can work like you did. I'm tired of enabling laziness. Temi Tokpe tried to convince her to reconsider, but Alhaja Ronke was firm. The will was updated in late February 2024, leaving everything to Temi Tokpe. On March 15, 2024, Temi Tokpe received a frantic call from Uncle Gbenga. Temi Tokpe, come quickly. Mama has died. Temi Tokpe rushed to the compound. Her uncles were gathered, looking appropriately grief-stricken. They said Alhaja Ronke had died peacefully in her sleep. Found her in the morning when she didn't wake up for Sab prayer. Temi Tokpe was devastated. She'd just spoken to her grandmother 3 days earlier. Alhaja Ronke had seemed fine, but she was 78 with health issues. Death could come suddenly at that age. The uncles handled funeral arrangements. They said Islamic burial should happen quickly, within 24 hours. Temi Tokpe, overwhelmed with grief, let them manage everything. The funeral was the next day, March 16th. Hundreds of people attended. Alhaja Ronke had been a prominent Ibadan businesswoman. The white casket was close-cut, which Uncle Gbenga explained was because of Islamic tradition and the family's preference. Temi Tokpe cried throughout. She'd lost her second mother, the woman who'd raised her, her anchor. After burial at the family cemetery, life continued. Temi Tokpe mourned, went to work, tried to process her loss. 2 weeks later, on March 30th, the family gathered for the will reading. The lawyer, Mr. Akintola, who'd worked with Alhaja Ronke for decades, read the will. I, Alhaja Ronke Adeyemi, being of sound mind, leave my entire estate valued at approximately 50 million to my granddaughter, Temi Tokpe Adeyemi. This includes all properties, businesses, and financial assets. My sons receive nothing. The room erupted. Uncle Gbenga stood up shouting, "This is impossible. She wouldn't do this, Mr." Akintola remained calm. The will was updated February 28, 2024. Signed and witnessed properly. It's legally binding. Uncle Whale demanded, "We're contesting this. She must have been coerced. You can try. But I assure you, Alhaja Ronke was of sound mind and made this decision freely." The uncles left furious. Over the next weeks, they tried to contest, but lawyers confirmed the will was ironclad. Temi Tokpe, was the sole heir. Temitokpi didn't want the inheritance to destroy family relationships. She offered to share some proceeds with her uncles, but they rejected it angrily. "We don't want your charity. That's our mother's wealth. It belongs to us." By May 2024, they'd stopped speaking to Temitokpi entirely. On June 10th, 2024, 3 months after the funeral, Temitokpi received a text from an unknown number. The message had no words, just a photo. Temitokpi opened it and her phone nearly fell from her hands. It was a photo of Alhaja Ronke, sitting in a chair, wearing a wrapper and buba, looking directly at the camera, very much alive. A second message came. "Your grandmother isn't dead. Your uncles faked everything. She's being held at a house in Abeokuta. If you want her back, bring ish 20 million cash to a location I'll provide. If you contact police, she dies for real." Temitok's mind raced. This had to be fake. A scam using an old photo. Grandma was buried. She attended the funeral. But the photo looked recent. The wrapper Alhaja Ronke was wearing looked new, not from old photos. Temitokpi zoomed in. There was a newspaper visible in the background. The front page showed a headline from June 2024. This photo was taken days ago. If this was real, Alhaja Ronke was alive, had been alive this whole time. Temitokpi called the number. No answer. She texted back, "How do I know this is real? How do I know my grandmother is actually alive?" A video came through, 30 seconds long. Alhaja Ronke sitting in the same chair, speaking directly to camera. "Temitok, it's really me. I'm alive. Your uncles did this. Don't pay them anything. Just call police. Tell them where I am. The address is..." The video cut off. Another text. "Next time she speaks without permission, she'll regret it. Please a 20 million. You have 3 days." Temitokpi was in shock. Her grandmother was alive. The funeral had been fake. The burial had been fake. But who sent her this message demanding ransom? And why? The obvious suspects were her uncles. They staged grandma's death. But if they were holding her, why reveal it now? Why demand money from Temitokpi when they'd expected to inherit everything themselves? Unless the plan had gone wrong, Temitokpi pieced it together. The uncles probably staged grandma's death, expecting the will would give them the inheritance. When it went to Temitokpi instead, they were stuck. They couldn't bring grandma back, because then Temitokpi would keep the money and they'd get nothing. So they kept her hidden. But holding her indefinitely wasn't sustainable. So now they were demanding ransom from Temitokpi. But who sent the message? The uncles wouldn't text from their own phones. Maybe they had an accomplice. Or maybe one of them was acting alone, trying to get money without the others knowing. Temitokpi decided to investigate before contacting police. If she went to police and they botched the rescue, her grandmother could actually be killed. She hired a private investigator, showed him the photo and video. He traced the location. The video's background showed specific details, a particular window design, wall color. The investigator cross-referenced with properties in Abeokuta. Within 2 days, he identified the house, a rental property in the Aita Ocean area of Abeokuta, rented 3 months earlier in April 2024 under a fake name. But the investigator got security footage from nearby shops. The person who rented it was Uncle Tunde. So Uncle Tunde was holding Alhaja Ronke in Abeokuta. But was he acting alone or with his brothers? Temitokpi didn't want to pay Maza 20 million ransom. It would reward the uncles for kidnapping and elder abuse. But she also didn't trust police not to botch a rescue. She decided on a third option: expose them publicly and force them to release grandma to save face. She gathered evidence, the photo, the video, the investigators' report identifying the Abeokuta house and Uncle Tunde renting it. Timeline showing the rental happened right after the will reading. Then she went nuclear, posted everything on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. My uncle staged my grandmother's funeral, buried an empty casket, and have been holding her hostage in Abeokuta for 3 months because she left her inheritance to me instead of them. Here's the proof. She tagged news outlets, journalists, human rights organizations. Within hours, the story was everywhere. Ibadan family fakes grandmother's death for inheritance, holds her hostage. When plan fails, the public response was immediate and furious. People demanded police investigate. Activists showed up at the Adeyemi compound demanding answers. News crews camped outside. The uncles panicked. They couldn't maintain the charade anymore. The whole country knew. Within 24 hours of Temi Tokpe's posts going viral, Uncle Tunde discovered Alhaja Ronke in Abeokuta. He brought her to a hospital claiming he'd found her wandering confused, possibly abducted by criminals months ago, but now recovered. But everyone knew the truth. The timeline didn't match. The evidence was public. Uncle Tunde's claim was obviously a cover story. Alhaja Ronke was alive, safe in hospital, reunited with Temi Tok. Medical exams showed she was malnourished and stressed, but physically okay. Psychologically traumatized but recovering. In the hospital, with Temi Tokpe present, Alhaja Ronke told the full story. In early March 2024, her sons had come to her, said they needed to discuss her health, gave her tea. She drank it and became drowsy. When she woke up, she was in a strange house, the house in Abeokuta. Uncle Gbenga explained, "Mama, we're staging your death. We need to trigger the will. Once we get the inheritance, we'll bring you back and say it was a miracle. You just need to stay here for a few months." Alhaja Ronke was horrified. "This is insane. Let me go immediately." "We can't. We've already announced your death. The funeral is tomorrow. Just cooperate." They kept her locked in the house. Uncle Tunde stayed with her, keeping watch. The other brothers handled the funeral in Ibadan. The closed casket at the funeral held weights, not a body. They buried it quickly, Islamic tradition as an excuse, so no one would question. After the will reading revealed everything went to Temi Tokpe, the uncles panicked. Their plan had failed spectacularly. They'd staged their mother's death for nothing. Now they couldn't bring her back without losing face and potentially facing legal consequences. So they kept her hidden, argued about what to do. Uncle Tun suggested demanding ransom from Temi Tokpe. The others initially refused, but after months of deadlock, agreed. Uncle Tunde sent the message and video, but he'd been sloppy, not realizing the video showed enough background detail to trace the location. Alhaja Ronke added one more detail. "I updated my will to exclude them because I knew they were greedy. I just didn't think they'd go this far." Temi Tokpe could have pressed criminal charges: kidnapping, elder abuse, fraud, forging death certificates, illegal burial of a false body. But Alhaja Ronke begged her not to. "They're still my sons. I don't want them in prison. I just want them away from me." The uncles weren't prosecuted criminally, but the social consequences were devastating. The story was national news for weeks. The Ibadan sons who buried their mother alive. Every detail was public. The staged funeral, the empty casket, holding her hostage for 3 months, demanding ransom when their inheritance plan failed. Their reputations were destroyed. Business associates cut ties. Friends avoided them. They couldn't show their faces in Ibadan without people staring and whispering. The Islamic community in Ibadan was especially furious. The uncles had desecrated an Islamic funeral, buried an empty casket, violated sacred traditions. Mosques refused them entry. Religious leaders publicly condemned them. Their own families were ashamed. Wives filed for divorce. Children changed their surnames, not wanting to be associated with the men who buried their mother for money. Alhaja Ronke disowned them formally, updated her will again, explicitly stating they would never receive anything even after her actual death. Added clauses preventing them from contesting. Within 6 months, all 4 uncles had left Nigeria. Uncle Gabenga moved to Ghana, Uncle Wale to South Africa, Uncle Femi to the UK, Uncle Tunde to Canada. They couldn't live in Nigeria with the shame. But even abroad, the story followed them. Nigerian diaspora communities knew. Employers who Googled their names found the articles. They lived in exile, branded forever as the men who faked their mothers a funeral for inheritance. Alhaja Ronke recovered slowly from the trauma. She moved in with Temitokpe, not wanting to return to the compound where her sons had drugged her. She was angry. I gave them everything, raised them, supported them financially their whole lives, and they repaid me by faking my death and locking me in a room for 3 months. But she was also resilient. By age 78, she'd survived being widowed young, building businesses from nothing, and now this betrayal. She wasn't letting it destroy her. She helped Temitokpe manage the inherited properties and businesses, taught her everything about the textile trade. By 2025, Temitokpe had expanded the businesses, increasing value. They sold the family compound, too many bad memories, used proceeds to build a new modern house in a different Ibadan neighborhood. Alhaja Ronke also started advocacy. She spoke at events about elder abuse, how family members can exploit elderly relatives, how to protect oneself legally. People think elder abuse is strangers in nursing homes, but often it's your own children, the ones you raised and trusted. My own sons staged my funeral while I was alive. If it can happen to me, it can happen to anyone. By 2027, the story had become a cautionary tale. Law schools used it in inheritance law classes. The empty casket had forced legal changes. New regulations requiring medical death certificates to be verified before burials. 3 years after the ordeal, during an interview, Temitokpe and Alhaja Ronke reflected together. Alhaja Ronke spoke first. People ask if I regret cutting my sons out of my will. I don't. That decision saved my life. If I'd left them the money, they would have gotten away with it. Staged my death, inherited, brought me back claiming miracle, kept the money. My exclusion of them exposed their greed. Temitokpe added, when I got that text with grandma's photo, I could have paid the ransom. Master 20 million was affordable from the inheritance, but paying would have rewarded them for kidnapping. Instead, we exposed them publicly. No ransom, no prison, just truth. Alhaja Ronke continued, prison would have been too easy. They'd serve a few years and come out claiming victimhood. But shame is permanent. Every time someone Googles their names, the first result is man who faked mother's funeral. That's a life sentence. My sons are in exile, not legally forced, but socially. They can't come back to Nigeria without facing the community's judgment. Their children won't speak to them. Their wives divorced them. They lost everything they cared about: status, respect, family. And they got no money. The inheritance stayed with Temitokpe. My businesses are more successful than ever. I'm alive, healthy, and happy. They failed completely. Temitokpe reflected, what I learned is that justice doesn't always need courts. Sometimes public exposure is more powerful than legal punishment. We didn't need a judge to convict them. The Nigerian public did that. Social media did that. Their own shame did that. People tell me I should have forgiven my uncles, but forgiveness doesn't mean no consequences. They faked my grandmother's funeral, held her hostage, demanded ransom. Those actions have natural consequences: shame, exile, loss of family. That's not revenge, that's reality. Alhaja Ronke concluded, I'm 81 now. I've lived through my own fake funeral. I've been to my own burial. Not many people can say that. It's darkly funny in a way. My sons wanted me dead so badly they staged it, but I'm still here, and they're the ones who disappeared. This is Temitokpe and Alhaja Ronke's story. Grandmother died March 2024, Ibadan elaborate funeral. Will left on 50 million to granddaughter, nothing to 4 sons. June 2024, anonymous message, photo grandmother alive. Uncle's stage death buried, empty casket, expected inherit. When granddaughter got everything, they panicked, kept grandmother hidden. Abeokuta 3 months, demanded Biller 20 million ransom. Granddaughter exposed publicly, social media viral. Uncle's forced release, grandmother claim found her. Truth revealed, staged funeral burial hostage. No criminal charges, grandmother refused, but social consequences destroyed them. Reputations ruined, families divorced them, exiled to other countries, shame permanent. Grandmother alive, successful businesses expanded. Subscribe. Comment if public shame is worse than prison. Share if you believe family greed has no limits.
Everything is so peaceful now. Yes, my child.